a week to coincide with that purpose? Does the profession that you spent countless years studying and training and conforming to constantly give you confirmation that you are operating in your purpose? If you answer no to any of those questions, when you get hit with the trials and tribulations of your occupation, it will crack your very foundation of your resiliency. It will get you out of posture and have you constantly considering quitting as a viable solution. This is because your profession is not attached to your purpose. Finding that purpose is a quest, and I can remember where my journey started. The 5th grade. I knew since the 5th grade I wanted to be a school teacher, which was odd because my father never graduated high school, and my mother, she never made education the top priority. My mother made sure we went to school because it was mandated, but she never had the opportunity to come to PTA meetings, teacher conferences, or any other school events. My mother only came to school when my sister got into trouble, and then she had to go so she can deal with the situation. So where did this journey to become a school teacher come from? Miss Moore, she was my 5th grade teacher. She was the first teacher who took the time to know me as a student beyond the classroom. Miss Moore knew I needed extra help, so she started building a relationship with me. She kept me after school to help clean the erasers. She knew I needed help in math, so she started tutoring me. She asked me questions about my family and about my life outside of school. Now, we didn't have transportation in my family, so she had to get permission to drive me home after our sessions. And I had the opportunity to meet her family. I had an opportunity to feed her baby and just do regular stuff like that. And before then, I always thought teachers were superhuman. Like, they didn't live regular lives like everyone else. But her down-to-earth personality and her compassion towards me and her willingness to go beyond the norm, all of that inspired me to want to do the same for others. However, just knowing that I wanted to be a teacher did not prepare me for that, nor did it put me on the path for becoming one. So just listen, no one in my family had ever graduated from college or have ever gone to college. So growing up in my home, I knew education was important, but that only entailed going to school and doing well. No one knew the path for how to go past high school. It wasn't until I actually met my best friend, Sharice, that I began learning about life beyond high school. See, Sharice, she was an Army brat. She was well-traveled, and she had her whole life mapped out in middle school. Watching her prepare for going to college by taking the SAT and talking to guidance counselors and just being active in her extracurricular activities, that's how I learned that I was not working a plan to become a teacher. And it wasn't just going to happen just by me showing up in someone's classroom every day. So Sharice got me to take a look at my classes, which actually revealed I wasn't even on a college track. So she assisted me in adjusting my courses and had me sign up for the correct English course that I even needed to go to college. And that's how I ended up in Mr. Johnson's English class. Now, Mr. Johnson was the complete opposite from Miss Moore. He quickly identified me as a student who wasn't what he considered college material. In fact, he actually told me that I should not even be enrolled in his class. He said I should actually be in a remediation class because I used my grandmother's dialect. And the way that I sliced my verbs and my nouns was indication of that dialect. I mean, his low expectations and my lack of belief made me feel that I was not worthy of going to college. Who was I fooling anyway? No one in my family had been to college. So what made me any different? Now that year, I became insecure and noticeably quiet in class. Yet and still, I met every one of his expectations, to include the one of him saying that I wasn't college material. So I gave up on my dream of teaching and I decided to become a fashion designer. All I had to do was improve my trade of sewing and drawing, and I'd be in there. No college, no improper grandma's grammar, no more scrutiny from snobs like Mr. Johnson. I was sold. When I announced this grand idea to my mother, though, In her frustration and to my dismay, she said, name me one Black successful fashion designer. Now, of course, I had not prepared for that question, so I did not have a response. So I was just stuck. And if the truth be told, there weren't many successful Black fashion designers in the early 80s anyway. I guess I could have been the next Zelda Valdez or Patrick Kelly, but I probably would have had to move to Paris to do so. And I had never even been out of North Carolina. So my mother told me, girl, you are not going to be a fashion designer, and that you better select a career that's always going to be needed, like a doctor or a lawyer or a nurse, or you guessed it, a school teacher. So I went back to the drawing board, back to my first dream as being a teacher. And I told myself I could do it because no matter what was said, I made it out of Mr. Johnson's English class. Unbeknownst to me, Mr. Johnson's statements about my English didn't make it out of me. I guess they were wrong when they said sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt me, because his words hurt. In fact, I carried his collateral damage with me to my freshman year at North Carolina Central University. So my transition to college was not easy. I was actually scared. I was nervous, and I was fully believing all the internal reasons I carried for not deserving to be there, especially that one about my grandmother's dialect. It haunted me in every class, in every assignment, in every oratorical experience. And I just ended my first semester in college with a 1.9 GPA. I was defeated and ready to quit. I went home on Christmas break, broken and devastated. And I begged my mom to allow me to quit. I remember her calling my aunt over to the house and both of them sitting me down and telling me that I was the curse breaker. I was the one that was going to change the family's trajectory and set the stage for those behind me to also go to college. But as good as their speech was sounding, my only thought was, I didn't sign up for that. I don't want to be the curse breaker. But these two women didn't let it go. They told me to go back one more semester and finish the year. And if at the end of the year, if it didn't improve or if I still felt like quitting, I would have their blessings to do so. My aunt told me that the women in our family, they are not born to be quitters. And as I began to walk away, my mom called my name. And as I looked back, she said, to everything, there is a season. At that time, I had no clue what my mom was trying to tell me, but I didn't quit. I fought through college, knowing that my purpose would have a greater impact on the world than Mr. Johnson's words should have ever had on me. I went on to graduate from North Carolina Central University with a degree in education. And the one thing I learned about resiliency was this: it first starts with purpose. And your purpose will be challenged, but quitting is not an option. On my journey, the critical ingredients that gave me a perfect recipe to my purpose was remembering the scripture that my mother said, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heavens. Finding your purpose, you will experience all seasons. There are going to be times when you plant ideas like the farmer plants in the springtime. See, that's when I found my purpose. Talked about it with my best friend, and we lined a path up straight as a farmer's row of corn. But once the path was set, I was prepared to experience the beauty of the summer. You see, any seed planted grows under the golden rays of the summer suns. What we forget is that anything that grows will experience growing pain. Anything that grows in the summer will have to suffer the pestilence of the pests and parasites that eat on their leaves. And for me, my summer pain was the household that did not put education at the forefront of my foundation. The school teacher that told me I did not have the diction to make it to my destiny. So in moments of weakness, it ate at my psyche every time I met opposition and naysayers. But I suffered through the summer heat. So I reap the harvest of my commitment, just like farmers in the field of autumn when the harvest is plenty. This is when I walked across the stage and got my degree and broke the generational curses of my family. I remain resilient in overcoming the negative messages of my former teachers, and I became a school teacher myself. And in those moments when we are in the season that we are enjoying the fruits of our labors, we must always remember that autumn, it is also called the fall. And you can't experience the harvest without experiencing the dead of winter. The winter is the roughest of all seasons because that's where purpose is challenged. The ground is stony and hard, and nothing can be planted nor grow. It's in these moments where you must lean on the resilience that you have saved in the storehouse of your purpose. The winter is where most abandon their purpose, and little did I know, the fall was here and the winter of my career was on the way. This is where I learned while purpose is the cornerstone of the resilient posture, when it is tested in a trial by fire, it needs a supporting cast, which leads me to the second P of passion. Now, Jenny Allen once asked, what if the thing that caused you the most hurt in your life is the birthplace for your deepest passion? In December 1993, I packed my dorm room for the very last time after completing North Carolina Central University's teacher education training program. Now, this was important because 9 months prior to that, I had given birth to my son, Sakari. And this pregnancy had disappointed many people because they thought it was going to distract me from completing my journey. They didn't know that I had already suffered a million setbacks along the way. And my son was not a setback. He was a setup for me to go harder after my purpose. So I packed my room, I packed my degree and my baby, and I moved back to my hometown and landed my first job in a neighboring rural community. I was a little hesitant at first because when the superintendent interviewed me, she told me that I was going to be the fourth teacher to be placed in that classroom. 3 other teachers had quit within the first 4 months of school. Now, yet again, as I embarked on this new journey, I found myself scared, nervous, and self-doubting. I mean, what was I going to do with a classroom full of challenging African-American boys fresh out of college? But I walked out of that superintendent's office knowing 2 things. 1, quitting was not an option, so it was going to be me or them. And 2, to everything, there is a season. Now, starting out in a classroom of students that looked like me and knowing that they had been written off by teachers who lacked self-efficacy was the most hurtful thing in the world because I knew this place all too well. In their eyes, I found my passion. As they pierced at me, I realized in this moment, I had the opportunity to be Miss Moore or Mr. Johnson. In their eyes, I found that the fire of my passion had been forged in the hardest moments of my journey to my purpose. I knew what the benefits of having active listening and self-efficacy and high expectations would do for a population of students who never knew they had voices, who never knew their voices had value. And I knew what the benefit of holding them accountable for their success would do for them. Now, let's be clear. I was met with many challenges. That class presented me with many tests, but they didn't know that my life had already given me the answer sheet. Was it tiring? Absolutely. But it was a lot harder to collapse under the weight of the process because I understood the gravity of the product. Every day, my purpose was challenged, but my resiliency resided in my passion. Passion pushed me. It inspired me. It was like the fitness addict that gets addicted to the pain. It was like what the Goo Goo Dolls explained in their lyrics to the song Iris. It makes you bleed just to know you're alive. My students taught me that college did not teach me how to teach, but teaching did. Every turn in that classroom, I was met with opposition. The students were warned for what they wanted to do, and I was fighting to teach them what I needed to do. And that's where the magic of passion happened. They say necessity is the mother of invention. It is absolutely true. I found creative ways to combine their wants with their needs. I realized the methods that I taught to teach was excluded that socialization and the culture of this population of children. And they had not yet mastered the art of code switching. So they were simply getting lost in translation. This made them frustrated and rebel against the curriculum. So I practiced cultural pedagogy before it was even such a phrase. I found ways to make analogies out of the things they culturally understood, and I used those analogies to teach them the same principles they needed to master classroom lessons. I analyzed the reasons that caused 4 teachers prior to me to quit on these children. And I realized the lack of cultural diversity in the classroom created a space of anxiety for everyone involved. I ran through the disciplinary issues prior to me entering the classroom, and I realized that oftentimes the language the students were using were being misconstrued and seen as disciplinary issues instead of teachable moments that could be used to teach the students how to broaden their vocabulary. Watching how students naturally interacted before I wrote them up showed me that these children weren't uncontrollable, they were just rambunctious. So I needed to utilize classroom management to compartmentalize that energy. I also found creative ways to allow them to use the energy in active learning, because to everything, there is the season. For some, it was a hard transition. They fought me tooth and nail. This made for long hours in the classroom and seemingly longer hours after school to get prepared for the next day. Oftentimes people ask me, Stacey, do you ever get off of work? Or do you ever get tired of these kids? And to be quite honest with you, there was times that I questioned myself, but I stayed vigilant. I stayed resilient in the face of adversity, because every time a disengaged student raised their hand to ask a question or got upset when they were not called on, or every time a student had an epiphany and I could witness the illumination of the light bulb above their heads, that rekindled my passion. And it also reinforced my resiliency. I was on fire with the passion of my purpose, and it made me committed to raising these children from the flames of failure like a phoenix raising from the flames of the fire. Purpose plus passion was the push that my students needed to be successful. Now, that year started off like the dead of winter, but through my passion, I kept excavating the hard, stony grounds. And at the end of the year, I turned that class around and became the youngest national board certified teacher in North Carolina. And from that year forward, I was given all of the challenging third grade students. Who knew that I'd be the one that found my passion in this position? What an amazing lesson. What I learned about passion was that it's the fire that illuminates, and it is illuminated by the darkest moments of your purpose. So just like fire, passion consumes. Every day I taught third graders, I was consumed. I was consumed by my passion to see them succeed. I was consumed by learning to master every aspect of how to educate in the classroom, consumed with learning about them, consumed with teaching them, and consumed with seeing them transform. I was consumed with them growing, but I never stopped to consider that a fire doesn't only consume, it also has to be constantly fed, or it will burn out. Have you ever felt like your job no longer fed you? Have you ever been burnt out? See, statistics says that in the first 5 years of teaching, 44% of educators leave their profession because of teacher burnout. For me, it wasn't burnout like I was exhausted by the job. It was more so I had exhausted everything that I could do in that place. And that's when I learned the third P of the resilient imposter: place. I love my job. I was passionate about my purpose, but I had outgrown that place. Someone under the sound of my voice right now is contemplating leaving their job simply because they are out of place. There are organizations that fail not because of the lack of qualified personnel, but because the person with the qualification that's needed is wasting away in another department. Simply put, they are out of place. It's like Have you ever deposited a large sum of money into your account, but because that check didn't come from your banking institution, the check got put on hold? And even though you know the money is in your account, you can't do anything with it because the money is out of place. Some of us are just like that money. See, some of us have the wealth of knowledge that can change the lives of those that we serve, but cannot reap the benefit because we're out of place. Being out of place can leave you stagnant in your career. There's an old saying in the South that says stagnant water, it stinks. And that stench can suffocate you into submission. It can be compromising to your resiliency. Now, I love my third grade class, but the more I taught, the more I found myself peering out the side of the corners of that classroom, and I started to see that the students was excelling in my classroom, but when they got to the very next grade, they were failing. And that's when I realized that teaching students was impactful for a season. However, teaching teachers who would teach students would be impactful for generations. So my purpose, it was concrete, and my passion, it was intense, but I was out of place. And no matter how many students I taught, it didn't satisfy that unquenching passion to have a greater impact. I had to plot a new course. So teaching, that's my purpose and my passion. But it didn't mean I had to limit it to just being in a place where I would be positioned to teach students. And that's when it clicked for me. So what if I was being positioned to lead teachers? That epiphany just opened so many doors for me. It put me in a position that had never existed before in my district. I became the lead teacher for Jones County Schools. Now, once you've mastered a particular place for a significant amount of time, the transition can be difficult, and it can cause anxiety, and it can be painful, but that is nothing compared to the pain of remaining in a place that you have outgrown. Think of someone gifting you a pair of your dream shoes. For me, that would be a pair of red bottoms from Christian Labarthe. Yes, imagine someone giving you the perfect color and style, and when you wore them, you felt on top of the world. People complimented you, like the whole Cinderella glass slipper before midnight feel. But as the years progressed, your foot grew a half a size, and the shoe no longer fit. Now, if you like me, you would do any and everything before you got rid of that shoe. Like use a shoe stretcher, or wear a thinner sock, or wear no socks. Shoot, I even took the insole out of a pair of shoes. But no matter what happened, no matter how it accented my outfit, no matter how many compliments I received, every step I made in that shoe hurt. And that's what I realized about walking into a job that no longer fit. I tried to do everything to stay in it, knowing that I had outgrown it. Every time I stepped in that classroom, it hurt. So I had to get out of those red bottoms and buy a new pair, knowing that when you buy a new pair of heels, now men, this may not be your part of the story, but ladies, when you buy a new pair of heels, you still have to go through the pain of breaking them in. I didn't give up on teaching no more than I gave up on a pair of Christian Labarthes. I just had to step out of one and step into a different style, a different place. The uncharted territory of the lead teaching position held a host of challenges, but I remained resilient. Although I switched places, I was still walking in my purpose and my passion. As I got into the groove of teaching teachers, creative ways to impact students and assisting them in finding their passion within their purpose and leading them all in all facets of that cultural pedagogy, my time in that position was short-lived because it got me noticed. And I evolved to another place in the educational pipeline as the state assistance team member. Now, this expanded my territory from assisting teachers in my county to now being able to assist teachers across the state who was working in low-performing schools. As my territory increased, so did the gravity of my purpose. I was given the best of me to forward progression of the places I was purposed for. Now, as I assist in schools by helping them to elevate from the pitfalls of poor performance to the pinnacles of peak performance, I was always on to the next school. Then I began to realize that I had leveled up to the position of only utilizing my talents in a reactive state. I was providing a service that caused me to operate in my purpose after the damage had already been done. I had seen so many egregious oversights where students had become collateral damage that it had begun to affect me in an adverse way. I had reached a level that put me altogether out of reach of students. So I had to assess what I was doing, where I was at, and what was plaguing me in this place. Have you ever been in this place before? Have you ever heard of anyone taking 2 steps forwards just to take 3 steps back? That's where I felt I was. I realized this place was definitely satisfying my purpose, but I did not have the passion for staying in a reactive state. I wanted to find a way to get ahead of the problem and get into a proactive state. But how? I started out in the 3rd grade. I've trained teachers on how to teach. I reformed schools at the district and state level. But what other place could I go where my purpose would be best served in a proactive way? And when we get still and we get quiet and we start reflecting, the universe will always respond. I was at the end of my contract for the state assistance team, and my old superintendent, who was now, she had retired and had started working in a new venture in the early childhood arena. The child care teachers were struggling with the behaviors of 3-year-olds, and they had started suspending kids out of preschool. Can you imagine a 3-year-old being expelled from preschool? So she called me to see if I would be willing to come into the nonprofit world and help with this age group. And once again, I found myself scared, nervous, and full of anxiety. But I asked myself, what if the proactive space that I was looking for was outside of the traditional box of the educational system? The mere thought of that made me cringe because I had dedicated countless years getting qualified to serve the K-2 educational system, only to find that maybe the purpose resided outside of the box. In this transition, I learned that socialization begins in infancy. The impact of the cognitive and emotional and social development had to be formulated in the early childhood years. And being the educational specialist for Smart Start was a completely different career, working with a completely different population that I had not even been formally trained to work with. But once again, my purpose greeted me at the door like a chauffeur at the airport, holding a sign saying, "Welcome, Stacy. We have been waiting for you." I immediately began assessing the situation that started kids off on a faulty foundation. And I began training adults who work with children from birth to 5 years old. Knowing the long-lasting effects of dropping the ball in this position fueled my passion to give my all. And as I continued my journey, the trials and tribulations of a failing educational system began to hit closer to home. Here I was doing great things for other people's children, while my own son was suffering at the hands of educators who still refused to teach each child with their own unique abilities. Talk about being hit and wanting to throw in the towel of resiliency. Once again, the same thing that happened in the classroom began happening again, but this time it was personal. I was now distracted with keeping my son out of the school to prison pipeline. Now that knocked the wind out of me. Everything in me screamed for me to just quit. Yes, it was my purpose, but this was my son. Yes, I was on fire with my passion, but what did that matter if I was watching the fire in my son's eyes burn out? Yes, I knew that I learned and I executed and I had proved every position that I was placed in. However, that meant nothing if my son had no place to understand and nurture him. So in that manner, that wasn't conducive to his forward progressive, where was the place for Zakari? Where was a place that was solely dedicated to developing his dreams, determining to push him to his destiny without demonizing him for the dilemmas that he was facing? I searched high and low, and there was no place for children like Zakari, except for alternative schools that focused on disciplinary issues before positive academic direction. My son didn't need an alternative school. He needed a school that gave him an alternative way of learning. This place, this purpose, nor this passion was enough to keep me from quitting if it meant I gained the world only to lose my son. So I was done being resilient. I was done with this place. Because how could this happen? I mean, I went through it all, from finding my purpose to igniting my passion to following it to this place, out of place and misplaced, debating with myself because I knew I was created for this place. And that's when it hit me. What if I was created for this place? What if this whole time I was created to create a place? What if this whole time my purpose and my passion was leading me to a place inside of myself that would break the generational curses of those who needed an alternative school, but not an alternative school? And that's when I realized that every place I was placed prior to this place was preparing me to create a place for displaced children. My resiliency in every place gave me access to new places that provided me with inspiration, situations, and information necessary to create a place for children like Zakari. That was the lesson. Find a place where you can serve that serves your purpose. And when it no longer serves you, go to a new place where you can grow. And if no such place exists, create it. Easier said than done. Because when I created Zeka School of Arts and Technology, I was coming in a community on the heels of a failed charter school. So the mere utterance of the words charter school put a nasty taste in people's mouths. People would instantaneously tell me a charter school in this area won't work. You think you're going to do something better than the last charter school? I even endured falsehoods like charter schools don't do anything but take money away from public schools, or you don't care about the kids, you're just trying to make money. There was even personal attacks like, ain't nobody gonna send their kid to a school with a blue-haired principal. Blow after blow, I was taking hits by the very people that I came to help. But despite the blows, I still canvassed the same community, speaking to the same people, same politicians and parents, telling them that Zeka was a charter school that would cater to the social and emotional traumas of their children. I strive to get them to understand that this school was tailor-made for this community. They would smile, show their teeth, and then go on social media and bite at me. But then that's when the old saying, every person showing their teeth ain't smiling, started to have a new meaning for me. Just imagine people who had just hugged you, laughed with you, and complimented you, leaving you and going straight to Facebook and saying something that was polar opposite to what was said when they were in your face. Now, I don't know about you Apex professionals. I don't know how y'all feel about it, but for me, one of the hardest things in the world was to allow for people to disrespectfully discredit me and have my hands tied with the ropes of professional diplomacy. I often wanted to drop the Queen's English and ask them to excuse my French as I showed them how well versed I was in a host of words that will not be found on the SAT. But instead, I sat and stewed. And I did those small voices of doubt, fear, and heartbreak started to creep in and echo everything that people had said to me about giving up. And once again, I wanted to quit. Biting my tongue to people who were backbiting me made me feel so defeated and weak. I felt the world was staring at me, looking for me to hang my head and fold under the weight of their words. But I knew if I did, it would be like blood in the water in this pool of sharks. And that's when I implemented the last P of the resilient posture, poise. You see, you can be operating in purpose, totally passionate about the place that you're in, and there will still be people talking about you, challenging you and trying to take you out of character. This will eventually get you out of a resilient posture and make you grow weary, weak, and eventually make you quit. So I had to make a commitment to myself that I would not give them the satisfaction of making me stoop to their level. Instead, I would rise to the occasion and greet the situation with poise. Now, poise is defined as being graceful and elegant and having an elegant bearing in a person, or just simply having balance. People often quit because they simply cannot find balance, whether it's your work life, whether it's your home life, whether it's being balanced between the voices on the outside against the voices from within. People who lack poise topple over and quit. Trust and believe, while creating Zeka, many days felt topsy-turvy, but it gave me strength to develop poise. Starting the charter school was tough enough, but going against the grain of the status quo in the educational structure, see, that created a hurricane of questions and comments and concerns. And I admit, rightfully so. In moments of questions, I had to do research. I had to find the pros and the cons of what I was creating at Zeka. I researched trends from the Harlem Children's Zone in New York. I went to the Ron Clark Academy. I looked at traditional disciplinary methods. I studied holistic meditation approaches for correcting discipline issues. And then I pulled portions from each one to create the vision and mission of Zeka. And as you can imagine, the judgments began to fly. But as I became more mature in my poise, I realized that being graceful didn't mean I had to sit silent and take tongue lashing, nor did I need to lash out on them with the same emotional assaults. I learned that balance wasn't established through emotion. It was created through education and educating people that were ignorant to the fact of the things that they were speaking on. A foundation built on emotion will never be able to sustain the weight of your purpose because of the ebbs and flows of emotion. They come and go, but if you build your foundation based on facts, the foundation is substantially stronger because the conversation is irrefutable to the intelligent. And the opinions of the non-intelligent challenges my intelligence if I get into a war with words with them. Y'all see what I did there? The thing I learned about poise is this: knowledge nulls and voids the nonsense. That jewel helped me immensely. My journey to understanding poise and silencing the noise from the outside centered me. Yet, there were still numerous trials and tribulations that I would endure, which required grace. I was beginning to learn more and more that words like grace and balance and poise, they don't exist without conflict. And while I stood on the foundation of knowledge when dealing with the outside world, it does not mean that it wasn't weighing in on me emotionally. But I had to learn not to just let me fall, but I had to learn not just to like me, but I had to fall in love with me. I had to love the skin that I'm in. I had to make positive affirmations to myself about myself. I had to balance out the negativity. See, I need each of you to affirm who you are, because if you don't, you will begin to listen to the world's words and they will tell you who you aren't, and it will hurt you to your core. So be bold in who you are. Make no excuses for your uniqueness. Allow it to make an example. So yes, I have blue contacts and blue hair, and they didn't have to understand it. As long as that little girl or little boy that came to the school and met me saw in me my example and not an excuse, that it was okay to be different and intelligent as long as the children understood. And it was okay. The people who culturally shunned me for having blue eyes didn't get to suppress me or my Blackness because they didn't know that there were kids in Sierra Leone and Zimbabwe with blue eyes. They didn't know that when you take a 4-lens personality test, the color blue means that you value relationships and that you are genuine kindness and sincerity with compassion, and that all of that is important to you. It also means that you enjoy working with opportunities and collaborating with others. So I made no excuses for looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. Instead, I looked through blue-colored contacts, and I saw the world through the lens of love and compassion. Therefore, your views cannot distort my vision. Never allow their views to distort your vision. Instead, until your vision comes to fruition and it makes them reconsider their vantage points, until then, remain poised. Never. Now, allow me to be clear. I do not want you to suppress your emotions, because that's not being poised. That's actually unhealthy, and it can be potentially dangerous. So I'm saying, keep your bearings and bearings about yourself. You are the shepherd of your flock. You cannot bleed on the sheep, because it will stain them and attract the wolves. So what do? You get you a circle of solution-oriented shepherds that can vent your grievances to and give you viable options to rectify your grievances, instead of giving you the option to quit. There will be days that you won't want to talk to anyone, not even your circle. You will have days where you will get hit and you are going to just want to lay there and cry. I can't count how many of those days I had on all the fingers and toes on this call. On those days, I smiled harder. I complimented more. And then when I got home, I ran the shower as hot as I could stand it. I turned on some music to drown out the world, and I got in and cried as hard as my tear ducts would allow. And then I got out and I would assess the issue and determine if it was something that had merit. If it did, I went into a solution-oriented mode. And if it was unwarranted, I ate dinner and went to sleep. But the next day, the very next day, I put on my best outfit, my favorite shoes, and reminded myself who I was. And I walked into school professional, polite, and poised, with a comprehensive plan to execute my purpose. I would not give anyone the pleasure of seeing me defeated, not today, not tomorrow, not now, not ever. Oddly enough, that attitude began to quiet the noise from the outside, and the haters, see, they became silent. Yet and still, when you are in a position of leadership and when you are on a crash course to save the world, there is no escaping the noise. If it ever gets too quiet, that's when you better start listening, because that's when you better start looking for that curveball. But where could it have come from? I mean, I was winning over the community, the children was loving me, and I knew who I was. And I was walking in my purpose with grace and balance. Then boom, here come the curveball of COVID-19. Now for me, I had been hit so many times on this journey that I had started getting adjusted to the taste of the gloves, accustomed to the taste of the blood in my mouth. And I had been in so many dog fights along the way that throwing in the towel was never an option. I immediately started doing research to find what are the things that's working in other places around the world to prevent this pandemic from becoming problematic for my student population. And while I was knee-deep making virtual and hybrid class schedules and buying plexiglass and Lysol wipes and masks and air purifiers and 6 distance feet signs and chemical disinfectants to spray the building and organic disinfectants to spray the staff and the students before they came in the building. Yeah, I said it. Spray the children before they come in the building. But before you start judging me, just know that we are 10 months into this pandemic and we haven't had any clusters. So back to what I was saying before I was virtually interrupted. I was on it. I was ready to address any questions that came from the outside world, whether it came from a parent, a politician, or a pest. I was poised because I knew I had done the research and I was ready. Then once again, I was blindsided. I was snuffed, sucker punched. I don't know if you have ever been punched from the blind side. Just know that it hits differently. I could not believe it. I had been fighting the outside world so much that I was oblivious to the war that was going on inside the school. There's an old African proverb that says, when there is no enemy within, the enemy outside can do you no harm. And right now, I was in a war that I didn't even know was brewing. I'd become so purpose-driven and passionate about creating a place where students could thrive that I totally neglected and looked past a population of people that was also being affected by the pandemic, the teachers. I never took into consideration that while I have been honing my skill set, building, preparing, and reinforcing my resilient posture at every twist and turn, that there were teachers who were being crushed by the blow. They were suffering losses. They didn't share my purpose, my passion for this place, nor were they poised because they were here for a paycheck. So when the hits came, I had to turn my attention inward. This has been the biggest challenge yet, fixing broken teachers. It's often asked, who motivates the motivator? But I have rarely heard that answer before. Well, today I had to answer it. I found it was easier to be poised when you had to combat the personal wars that made you want to succumb to surrendering. But things are substantially different when someone else's resilience posture or lack thereof has so much impact on your purpose that you actually had to contemplate quitting because there was no way that you could do it on your own. It was literally impossible. I mean, come on now. I had come too far to forfeit on the behalf of anyone else. Initially, I was infuriated. I had teachers walking out without even giving the courtesy of a 2-week notice. It was more like a today notice. They had no consideration for the collateral damage that it was causing the student population. But when you are in self-preservation mode, people usually revert to 2 primal instincts, fight or flight. And consequently, when your career choice has turned into a job and you no longer see your purpose, you lose the passion for it. So fighting is not the route you usually take. Flight is. So in the midst of a pandemic, the world is suffering from a teacher drought. I had teachers walking out. Then on the other end of the spectrum, I had teachers seeing the pandemic as an opportunity to exploit the CDC guidelines about the 2-week quarantine notice after they had been possibly exposed. Then I had amazing teachers who was becoming burnt out because they had to carry the line for the teachers that were absent. And then I had teachers who realized that we were in a teacher drought. So they started feeling indispensable and would begin doing egregious things that was contradictory to our policies. And so they had to be terminated. So what do you do when you have lost 40% of your teacher population and the noise is no longer outside, but you're getting hit from the inside, from disgruntled teachers, and some of the blows are warranted? What do smart people do? We pray. But then after you pray, you get creative. And I know you have heard that necessity is the mother of invention. Well, take it from me, it is true, because I was living it and every day was something new. I started to realize that my staff needed just as much love and resiliency training that I had given to myself. Most of my staff sincerely desired to help trauma-exposed children, not realizing though the potential in exposing their own unresolved personal traumas. Nonetheless, one thing that is for sure, until hurt people get the proper help, hurt people will hurt people. So I needed to do a couple of things. First, I had to cater to the mental health needs for my staff. I had to acknowledge the impact that this new world was having on them. I had to also be transparent in my communication and let them know that they were not alone. Because of my poise, they could not see that this new climate was taking its toll on me too. So I had to balance transparency and poise. Second, I taught them the resilience posture in a way that they could utilize it as an effective tool to assist them in squelching the voices in their head that was trying to get them to quit. I needed to give them a step-by-step process that I developed to help me find the strength in most of the egregious times in my career. So the same exact thing that I taught to them is the same thing I'm about to give to you. So yes, all this time I've been giving you a 50-minute introduction just to prep you for this process. So here we go. According to Forbes magazine in 2019, over 66% of Americans hated their jobs. I can only imagine what the numbers are now since the pandemic. So with that said, I offer you this. I want you to find the first P of the resilient posture, your purpose. I want you to remember what made you fall in love with the job you dedicated your life and your livelihood to. Ask yourself, was it because you knew that your job was going to literally save the lives of a generation of children? Or is it because you know the devastation that it will cost them if you don't show up? Whichever one it is, I want you to hold on to that reason. So anytime that you get hit and want to quit, you can remember your purpose. Then before you give up, I want you to literally ask yourself, are you willing to walk in the room where your students are? I want you to think of your children's teachers walk into the room with your kids, looking them in the eyes and saying, I know that what is in me has the potential to save your life. But today, I'm joining the population of people that has lost hope in your generation and have quit on you and their purpose. If you have not found your purpose, I need you to live every day searching for it, because every day that you don't, there is someone whose life is put on hold until you find it. Their life is depending on you. When you have found your purpose and the assignment gets dark and dreary, remember the second P of the resilient posture, which is passion. It may be a tough day, week, month, or year for you, but to some of the people you serve, they were born, live, and will die in the darkness if you don't illuminate it with your passion. I need you to be the light in dark places. I need you to be the lighthouse, a guiding light that will lead children out of the storm and rough waters of their lives to the calm shores in peace and prosperity. When you have used the passion of your purpose to ignite the minds of the children that you serve, make sure you remember the third P, which is place. Remember to operate in the place until you are no longer of service. And when you feel you have done everything you can, I want you to remember that your purpose and your passion are not tied to a particular place. It moves with the spirit of water. And you cannot allow it to become stagnant in one place, because stagnant water stinks. So be free to go with the flow of your purpose. And the last P is poise. No matter which place that the passion of your purpose leads you, always remember that no matter how hard it hits you, no matter how much pressure you are under, diamonds are formed under pressure. But the way they shine make everyone take notice, with no regards to the pressure that they had to go to get there. You are the diamond. Never sacrifice the product for the process. Keep shining. Never quit, and stay in the resilient posture. Brian, I want to thank you and the MAAP committee for allowing me to have this moment with your conference.
Ms. Stacy, thank you so much. And I would encourage folks on the call right now, if you didn't get a chance to hop into Ms. Stacy's breakout session yesterday, it is recorded. I would recommend that you take a look at that. Very powerful, connects well with her keynote this morning. Ms. Stacy, I also know that you're running a school. So for you to take time to be at our conference is just, we're very appreciative of that. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, and I'm at school right now. The staff was very supportive of this moment, and so was the kids. They allowed me the time to do this. So I do appreciate you allowing me this opportunity. Thank you, everyone, for everyone that was in the room too.
And just as a kind of a ending note here on a couple logistical things. Our next session grouping will start at 10:30. At 12 p.m. we have the award celebration. Please check that out. We have the photo contest going on today. You can submit that to Kristen Martin. And just one session note that the interdisciplinary climate change simulation, part 2 is scheduled for today. but it'll be a repeat part 1 from yesterday for folks that are interested in that. Miss Stacy, thank you again so much for your time and
You're
being with
welcome.
us. Thank you to your to Miss Jackie, to your teachers, to your kids for allowing you to be a part of our conference. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.